Shalom and welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt.
And I'm Kara.
And of course, this is our dog, Millie, who just wanted to be in the video. Some weeks she just is a little needy. So thank you for your patience with Millie the Wonder Dog. Okay, so this week we have a double portion of Matot and Masei. And what we are doing is choosing to do something from our JPS Torah discussion Rashi commentary from week Matot. And this heading is on page 143 if you have the book, and it's called Children First. So as always, I will read through the commentary and then we'll look at a couple discussion questions. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like and a comment. This helps the algorithm pick us up. And if you would, share this on your social media platforms as well. So, diving right in here. As the Parasha concludes, the tribes of Reuben and Gad request to be settled on the Jordan River's east side, where the Israelites currently find themselves, rather than on its west side, where the other tribes will reside after conquering the land of Israel. These two tribes are attracted to the river's east side because it is well suited for grazing their large herds of cattle. The tribes of Reuben and Gad agree, nevertheless, to cross the Jordan with the other tribes in the impending war of conquest, and they explain how they will safeguard their families and the possessions left behind during the military campaign. It says here in Numbers 32:16, "Then they, the tribes of Reuben and Gad, stepped up to him, Moses, and said, 'We will build here on the east bank of the Jordan, sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children,' before joining the other tribes to conquer the land of Israel." Now Rashi comments on the order of the words in this verse. "We will build here sheepfolds for our flocks." They were more concerned about their possessions than about their sons and daughters, since they gave precedence to their flocks over their children. Moses said to them, "Not so. Treat what is fundamental as fundamental, and what is secondary as secondary. First, build yourselves cities for your children, and afterward, pens for your flocks." This is Rashi's commentary on Numbers 32:16. As Rashi explains, by talking about their animals at the outset, the tribes of Reuben and Gad demonstrate misplaced priorities. Their flocks are first, their children second. Moses corrects them accordingly. In our modern era, economic blessings have sometimes come at the cost of rising materialism. People tend to regard as necessities many things that were once considered luxuries. Pressures to work to provide the best for the family have contributed to parents and children spending less time together. The challenge to prioritize children is as relevant today as ever. I think we could certainly identify with this. One of the things that was funny about the famous movie in 1985 called Back to the Future is when the family gets a television set in the 50s, and Michael J. Fox's character comes from 1985 and is back in 1955, he makes an offhand remark about having two television sets. And the family says, of course he's kidding with you, no one has two TVs. That because the child says, well, you must be rich, you have two TVs. No one has two TVs. I can hardly think of an instance where children don't have a TV or a monitor of some kind for a gaming system in their room, unless parents are more strict about those types of things. I think a lot of kids have today what definitely would have been considered luxuries, in our day. I feel like old people saying in our day, but just having devices, just having tablets or phones or something like that, that would have been considered a great luxury. I remember the first Nokia cell phone that I had around the time that I met you, and you lived about 35 minutes away from me. And if you came over this way to go to dinner or to be at our house, I would talk to you all the way home to make sure that you didn't fall asleep. That was a luxury of, oh my goodness, we have these fancy phones. But back then, you want to talk about a luxury, we had to pay by the minute. And so, we were racking up those minutes with those conversations. I think today, being able to have, for goodness sake, behind us, we have a Keurig coffee machine. Just being able to brew coffee in a single serve way would have been considered an extreme luxury just a few years ago. But the cost has come down for a lot of these things. And as technology goes, that's sort of what happens. The technology advances and the cost comes down. And so we have a way of having some of these nicer things. Now, for me as a husband, what's nice about you is that you don't like a lot of fancy jewelry or things like this. That I think if I make it possible with our income for you to have a selection of teas, I think you're fine. You can see behind us all those little gold jars are different flavors of tea because my wife loves tea. And again, I think we're low maintenance people that way. You know, we have a few nice things like a coffee machine or various teas or whatever, or my guitar is a nice guitar. But sometimes I think we can get into the attitude as parents that we need to provide fancy things for our kids as a way to show them that we love them. And that's just not right. We need to be putting the children's needs ahead of materialism. So in our discussion questions, we talk about this and something that really applies to our early family life that really isn't this way anymore, but in our early marriage and family life, this applied to us. So in 1960, according to the Pew Research Center, 25% of American married couples with children under 18 had two incomes. In 2012, that figure had escalated to 60%. What do you think are the driving forces behind the rise in two-earner families? Do you think that parents and children are better off for this change? Now, I will just say that even before I proposed marriage to you, I took your father to dinner and asked him for permission to propose. And he said to me, she has one dream, and that's to be a stay-at-home mom because your mother did not have the opportunity. Both of your parents had to work to make ends meet. And so you wanted to stay at home with children while they were young. So then when I proposed to you, you said the exact same thing. Yes, I will marry you, but I want to be a stay-at-home mom. If you can make that happen, then that's that's my decision. So we did make that work, and I'll let you speak to that. But even on a pastor's salary, and I've always been bivocational. I always was a pastor at first a youth minister, but for the first 5 years of ministry, I worked at our local Boys and Girls Club. So still working with young people, but having a second job so that we could make it possible to where when we started having children that you could stay home. Now we both work. And I think, we could have a discussion as far as rising of the cost of living and things like that. And, that obviously needs to be factored in here. But I think if we're really being honest, I think we just don't live as simply as people did in previous generations. I think we do have a lot of modern conveniences. I'm looking behind the camera here at our air fryer that we use every single day. It's very convenient. It's nice to have an air fryer. I think my grandmother, who grew up in the Great Depression, would have lost her mind, thinking of the concept of an air fryer. You know what I mean? I think she probably would have been frying things the old-fashioned way in oil or grease or something like that. She probably would have marveled at this invention. So what do you think about this idea of two-income families? And do you want to talk a little bit about our particular situation and how we tightened our belts and made it work? And I don't think our kids lacked for anything that they needed.
No, I don't think so either. And I think obviously it was a blessing that we were able to make that work because of, again, based on the type of job and income that the one person, if it's a single income, based on what they have, sometimes that's possible and sometimes it's not. Because if you have if you have somebody that's got a lower paying job and sometimes just out of necessity, you've got to have two incomes. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you have that second income, it's got to be enough to make it worth it, because otherwise if you're paying for childcare or any kind of, especially until they get into school age, it makes it hard and almost not even practical. So someone's got to stay with children unless you have a family member. So it's definitely difficult to do sometimes in certain areas, and incomes are all just a factor. But yeah, I did enjoy being able to do that. And as far as children and parents being better off for the change or not, I mean, I think it's just, it depends on just how you go about it. I mean, I think in either situation, you can be better or worse for it. You know what I mean? If you get so overwhelmed, if you're a stay-at-home mom and you don't feel like you have, an identity and this and that, and you're scrambling and you have no, money, then it can be a negative. But it also can be a positive to, have your own, children with you all the time. But also the advantages of having two incomes means there is less pressure there sometimes economically. You have the advantage to be able to maybe do some things that maybe you wouldn't. I was thinking that we didn't really spoil our kids with a lot of crazy things, but I mean, they never went without when they needed something, you know what I mean? And we were able to allow them to be involved in sports and different activities that maybe wouldn't have been able to be as easily come by, if we were only with one income at the time. Because so it just depends. I feel like there's pros and cons to both sides. It just depends on how careful you are. Because even if you work full time, both parents work full time, as long as you're conscious of the fact that you need to prioritize your children when you're not at work, then I think it's fine. Obviously, the example in the Bible here, they were not doing that. They were prioritizing their jobs over their children, and that, even if you do work, that doesn't mean that you have to flip your priorities, So I think parents and children better off. I guess it depends on the situation, really.
Well, and I think it's probably fair for us to mention that probably around, I'm just doing some simple math in my mind, probably around 2009, our youngest daughter was born in 2004. And so when she was 5, she would have gone to school, or maybe she was 6.
She was 6.
She was 6.
Yeah.
So in that time, when once all of our kids were in school during the day, you did go out and get a part-time job while they were at school, so that we did have some more money coming in for the added expenses that kids being in school have, like you said, with regard to sports activities or other extracurricular things. I think this is something that parents just have to make a decision on, because some parents in this day and age, now we had the privilege of because of scholarships and things, to have our children in a religious school. So we had a bit of an advantage that way, of because a lot of parents, if they are having one income, it's because one parent wants to stay back with the kids. And a lot of these people, just because of how our school systems are here in the United States, it varies obviously from city to city and state to state, but by and large, public education is going to probably be a bit anti our religious stance on certain issues. So some parents will even choose to homeschool their children, which means that if you're all the more involved in their lives, if they're not going away for several hours during the day at school and you have them, then obviously that gets rid of the opportunity perhaps of making, some extra money with a part-time job. We had the opportunity, as I said, because our kids were in religious education. We didn't have to worry about what they were learning in school that were social issues or issues of morality and things like that. And so I think it's maybe more difficult for parents that if you're homeschooling, unless the parent that's doing the teaching, or both parents that are doing the teaching, unless you have a way to have another income stream that is either passive, like maybe having some property or some other work at home opportunity that you might have. Obviously, this varies from family to family, but I think at least for us, that it was a good decision to only have one parent working, at least while the kids were really young.
Yeah, I agree.
So our next question is, can you name a possession that was considered a luxury when you were growing up, but now has become regarded as a necessity? I think we probably hit it on the head with just the idea, at least for me, the idea of the phone. I can't believe that our parents, when we were growing up in the 80s, it just was a different world. And I was in a vastly different situation, because when I was a young child, from ages 5 to about 12, I lived in a very small town in a rural part of the United States, where my town only had 400 people. We didn't have any traffic lights. It was a very idyllic, almost trapped in a time warp type of thing. It was kind of like the old show, the Andy Griffith Show, that fictional town of Mayberry. That's kind of how I grew up, and so it was not odd at all. But even people that lived in a more urban setting in the '80s, it just seemed like parents were more like, "Okay, you're going off on your bike now, and you'll be back in a couple of hours. Okay, we'll see you later." And our parents had zero idea exactly where we were. And, I remember when you and I were dating, each of us had a habit of having an empty prescription bottle full of quarters for us to make emergency phone calls at a payphone. That's how that's how old that we are. So the first phone that I ever knew that was like a portable phone, my dad got one, and it was in a bag. It was a bag phone. It was like a big, like a suitcase thing or whatever. That was definitely considered a luxury. But the reason he had it, he was a pastor, and he had situations where if somebody was in an accident or had an emergency and they needed to get a hold of the pastor, he made it a priority to have one of these things that was considered a luxury. But in his line of work and ministry, it was important for someone to get a hold of the pastor immediately. I I don't know how we would live in 2025 without being able to get a hold of our children. Like I
It's weird, yeah.
so that for me, I think
Yeah.
it's the phone.
Um, I was trying to think. Luxury versus necessity. Necessity is a strong word for me, but maybe a priority
Sure.
rather than necessity. Like I was trying to think, like when I was growing up, we didn't have like snacks in our house. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like we didn't
absolutely.
have snacks. And I remember going to my friend's house and she would have like little things of yogurt covered raisins and like crackers and like, oh, I don't know, like whenever I went to her house it was like, oh, little Debbie snacks and like things that I got to choose from her, her pantry. And I just thought that was so cool because we didn't have that kind of stuff. I mean, every once in a while, like if we had a party or a
Mm.
birthday or something, we would like buy some stuff that we just normally didn't have a lot of. The only snacks we had were like cereal and maybe popcorn, but that wasn't an air popper. It wasn't microwave popcorn,
Right.
and so I don't know. We just didn't have a lot of that, just all the time. Whereas now, I feel like here, like that's a priority that I keep snacks on hand
Well, and
for
it's
our
because
kids.
we like when our kids have people over,
Well, yeah, and when they were younger, I would have it, for their lunches. So they could easily pack their own lunches because I had them from a very young age pack their own lunches, and so that was easy for them to grab. Or for sports, we'd run out the door. And even now, as they're coming going from school and jobs and everything, like I've made that a priority. Whereas back in the day, that was a total luxury. But it is because of economical, progress, we are in a position where we can afford that, and so it's something that I prioritize for ease, for everybody. And so,
well, and I like how you said priority rather than necessity. I think that probably describes us more. Like we don't have new furniture or new vehicles or cable, but we make it a priority to have
yeah.
snacks.
Well, or even something like just both of us having a car.
Yeah,
That is a priority, but it's not
yeah,
a necessity. Like if we
right,
couldn't afford it, then, we obviously would be smart and only have one vehicle. But because we both are so busy with so many activities, we've prioritized each of us having a vehicle just so that way we don't have to coordinate so much and we
right.
can both be busy at the same
But
time.
even in that, we prioritized getting cars that were several years old so that
True.
we could pay them
True.
off quickly.
True.
And
Yeah.
it's a good feeling to have a couple of paid off vehicles,
True. But
But that's
yes.
the priority. We have
Yeah.
like right now, just being, transparent, you have a vehicle, and mine was like this last year. We need to get some things repaired, and you're like air conditioning in your vehicle, where, I had no air conditioning in my van for over a year, just because we'd rather do the things that are a priority to us and our family, I can roll the windows down in my van. You know what I mean? I can be hot
So,
in my
in
van.
other words, we're not prioritizing our vehicles over our children.
Right.
So we're following we're not following this bad example.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's, I would rather have dog food than a newer vehicle, right, Millie? I'd rather have, that, and you prioritize everything, and it's like what's important to you, what's important, and I find that even when we have the opportunity to travel on mission trips, I think we would rather have dinner in an interesting location in a country than buy a souvenir, than buy something to bring home. To us, the experience of having a meal in Portugal, where we were a couple of months ago, to be able to do that and to remember that experience, that is more special to us than buying I don't know, a little figurine or a piece of art or a coffee mug or something like that. We'd rather have the experience. So it's all priority. It's all priority. So I think I feel like every single week I quote my father, but something that my dad has always said is you can always see where someone's priorities are by looking at their bank account, by seeing what they spend their money on. What he used to say is their checkbook, but I don't know how many people still use a checkbook. But you can always see where someone's priorities are with how they spend their money. And I think someone could say, oh, no, I prioritize my family, I prioritize my kids. But if you're spending your money in such a way that that betrays that or makes that not true, then I think we need to have an examination. What are we spending our money on, and
Our time, our energy.
absolutely, absolutely. And some of us are in a situation where both parents just have to work in order to make ends meet. I mean, that's how we are now in our lives, and having two kids in college and things. It's just it is important for both of us to work, and both of us to work multiple jobs. I mean, we do that as a way to to do those types of things, and to prioritize the things that are important to us. And all of us, it's going to look different in every family. It's going to, there's no like right answer to it. I think the trick is, no matter how many people have jobs in our family, are we prioritizing spending time with the family?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us and our dog this week on the Rashi Nosh. And we pray that you would be inspired on how to prioritize your family and make them more important than the things that we have in our lives. Thank you so much, and shalom.